Hi, I'm Sarah, and on the day my parents changed the locks on our family home in Springfield, Ohio, I was sitting in my dorm room at Ohio State University, staring at lines of code that would eventually help the FBI track down international cybercriminals, while my mother's voice echoed through my phone speaker saying, "You've made your choice, Sarah. Don't come crawling back when your computer games don't pay the bills." Anyway, I didn't break down crying. I didn't beg them to reconsider. But what they didn't realize was who I was becoming, beneath their crushing disappointment. The cybersecurity specialist, whose algorithms would one day protect national infrastructure from digital warfare. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up as the daughter of Michael and Linda Chen in Springfield, Ohio, came with expectations that felt as rigid as the spreadsheets my father lived by in his accounting firm. Our family name might not have been synonymous with luxury like some corporate dynasties, but in our middle-class neighborhood, Chen Associates represented stability, tradition, and the kind of practical success that paid for college educations and reliable retirement plans. My father built his practice from a tiny office above Henderson's hardware store to a respected firm serving half the businesses in our county. From my earliest memories, I was surrounded by the steady rhythm of calculators clicking, the whisper of papers being filed, and the satisfied sighs of clients whose tax problems had been solved. Unlike my older brother David, who commanded attention with his natural charisma and effortless way with numbers, I preferred the quiet corner of our basement where my father had set up an old computer for educational purposes. While David charmed clients during summer internships at the firm, I stayed behind to explore the mysterious world of programming languages and network protocols. Business wasn't just our family's livelihood. It was the language my father and I shared when mathematics failed to bridge our generational gap. Every evening after dinner, he would pull out his ledgers and explain how proper financial planning could secure a family's future for generations. He taught me to appreciate the beauty of balanced books, the satisfaction of solved problems, the security that came from understanding money and how it moved through the world. The fall of my junior year in high school, when college application deadlines began looming like storm clouds on the horizon, my father called me into his home office one evening. The space smelled of coffee and leather, his mahogany desk illuminated by a banker's lamp that cast dramatic shadows across spreadsheets and client files. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying the weight of dreams he'd harbored for decades, "I want to discuss your future, not just any career path, but joining something that represents who our family is becoming." For the next few months, we spent countless hours planning my trajectory, late evenings after his client meetings, weekend mornings before David's soccer games. He explained how selecting the right business program would complement my analytical mind, how developing client relationship skills would honor my natural empathy, how understanding both the creative and practical sides of entrepreneurship could help me modernize Chen Associates when I eventually took over. My acceptance to Ohio State's business program became more than just an educational opportunity. It was our shared vision, a tangible manifestation of his belief in my potential to carry forward everything he'd built. When the acceptance letter arrived, hanging framed in his office next to his CPA certification, I couldn't speak. The future felt crystallized, predetermined in the most comforting way possible. "This isn't just about getting a degree," my father said, his voice unusually soft as we stood before that framed letter. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. This is about understanding your place in something bigger than yourself. When you graduate and join the firm, you'll remember what your mind is capable of achieving through discipline and tradition. College orientation arrived with all the fanfare my mother could orchestrate. Even David, home from his sophomore year at Northwestern's business school, seemed genuinely proud of his little sister following the family path. My classmates whispered about parties and freedom as we moved through the campus tours, and for the first time in my academic life, I felt the weight of expectations shifting toward me in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. My business classes afterward were carefully preserved in my memory like pressed flowers, each lesson reinforcing the foundation my father had laid. Accounting principles that echoed his bedtime explanations, marketing strategies that would help modernize his traditional client base, management theories that would prepare me to eventually lead Chen and Associates into its next generation. But something else was happening in the quiet hours between my required coursework. The university's computer lab called to me with the same magnetic pull I'd felt toward that basement computer years earlier. I began spending late nights there, ostensibly working on business presentations, but actually diving deeper into programming challenges that had nothing to do with profit margins or client retention strategies. 3 months into my freshman year, life had shifted in ways I couldn't have anticipated. I maintained perfect grades in my business courses, satisfied my parents with weekly calls, reporting on accounting theory and business ethics discussions, and generally fulfilled every expectation they'd established for my college experience. David continued to excel at Northwestern, sending home updates about internship opportunities and networking events that made my mother beam with pride during their regular phone conversations. Then came an opportunity that would change everything. Professor Martinez, who taught the one computer science elective I'd managed to squeeze into my business-heavy schedule, approached me after class on a Tuesday afternoon in November. The computer lab hummed with the familiar energy of students wrestling with coding assignments, but she pulled me aside to a quiet corner where her words could reshape my understanding of my own potential. "Sarah," she said, her expression serious but encouraging, "I've been watching your work in class, and your approach to cybersecurity challenges is remarkably intuitive. There's a research project I'm leading in partnership with the Department of Homeland Security, developing algorithms to detect suspicious network activity. I think you'd be an exceptional addition to the team." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. This wasn't part of the plan my father and I had so carefully constructed. This was completely outside the business trajectory that would lead me back to Springfield, back to Chen Associates, back to the safe, predetermined future we'd mapped out together. "But I'm a business major," I managed to say, as if this simple fact could shield me from the temptation of something that sounded infinitely more compelling than quarterly reports and client management strategies. Professor Martinez smiled knowingly. "The best cybersecurity specialists understand both the technical and business implications of digital threats. Your background actually makes you more valuable, not less. You think about problems from multiple angles, which is exactly what this field needs." She handed me a folder containing research papers and project specifications that might as well have been written in a foreign language, except they weren't foreign to me at all. As I read through the technical challenges and potential applications, something inside me responded with recognition and excitement that I'd never felt toward balance sheets or marketing presentations. "The project involves developing detection systems for advanced persistent threats," she continued, watching my face carefully as I absorbed the information. "Think of it as digital detective work, finding patterns that reveal when someone is trying to infiltrate systems they shouldn't access. The applications range from protecting corporate databases to safeguarding national infrastructure." That night, alone in my dorm room with textbooks for Principles of Marketing and Business Communications stacked beside the cybersecurity research folder, I faced a choice that felt impossibly complex. Everything my father had taught me about planning, about security, about building something lasting pointed toward continuing my business education. But everything my curiosity and intuition whispered pointed toward this unexpected opportunity to dive deeper into digital security challenges. I called home, intending to discuss Professor Martinez's offer with my parents, hoping they might see the potential connections between cybersecurity and business applications. Instead, I found myself delivering my usual report about classes and assignments, unable to find words for something that felt simultaneously thrilling and treacherous. "How are the accounting courses progressing?" my father asked, his voice warm with the assumption that everything was proceeding according to our shared plan. "Really well," I answered honestly. "Professor Williams says I have a natural aptitude for financial analysis." "Excellent. And the business law class?" "Challenging, but I'm managing fine." What I didn't say was that Professor Martinez's cybersecurity research consumed my thoughts during business law lectures, that I'd started reading technical papers instead of marketing case studies, that every algorithm I understood felt like discovering a new language I'd been waiting my whole life to learn. The following week, I made a decision that would alter the trajectory of not just my education, but my relationship with my family forever. I signed up for Professor Martinez's research project as an independent study, telling myself it was just intellectual curiosity, just a way to explore something interesting while maintaining my business major. But as I spent more hours in the computer lab analyzing network traffic patterns and developing intrusion detection protocols, I realized I wasn't just exploring an interesting side project. I was discovering who I actually wanted to become, independent of the future my father had envisioned for me. The research consumed me in ways my business coursework never had. Professor Martinez introduced me to concepts that felt like puzzles designed specifically for my mind: understanding how hackers thought, developing countermeasures for digital attacks, creating systems that could adapt and learn from new threats. Each breakthrough felt like a personal victory. Each solved problem reinforced my growing certainty that this work represented my authentic calling. By December, I was spending more time on cybersecurity research than on all my business classes combined. My grades remained strong across the board, but my passion was clearly focused in a direction that had nothing to do with the Chen Associates succession plan my father and I had constructed so carefully. During winter break, I returned home to Springfield carrying both my business textbooks and a laptop filled with cybersecurity research that represented hundreds of hours of work I couldn't easily explain to my family. The house felt smaller somehow. The conversations about client retention and tax preparation strategies felt less compelling than they had just months earlier. My mother greeted me with her usual warmth, eager to hear stories about college life and academic progress. My father wanted detailed reports about my business courses, questions about professors and networking opportunities, and how well I felt prepared for the next semester's more advanced coursework. David was home from Northwestern, full of stories about internship interviews and business plan competitions that made our parents glow with pride. As he described his latest project analyzing market expansion strategies for a Chicago-based consulting firm, I felt an unexpected disconnection from the enthusiasm that had once defined our family's shared vision for professional success. On Christmas Eve, as we gathered around the dining room table for our traditional family dinner, my father raised his wine glass in a toast that would haunt me for months afterward. "To Sarah's first semester of business school," he said, his eyes bright with pride and satisfaction, "and to the foundation she's building for our family's continued success. Next Christmas, she'll be halfway toward joining Chen Associates as a full partner." Everyone clinked glasses, my mother beaming, David nodding with genuine brotherly approval, and me smiling while feeling something cold settle in my stomach. In that moment, surrounded by their love and expectations, I realized how far I'd traveled from the path they believed I was still walking. The revelation came during spring semester, 3 weeks before I was supposed to register for my sophomore year business courses. I was in Professor Martinez's lab, debugging a network intrusion detection algorithm that had consumed my thoughts for weeks, when my phone buzzed with a text from my roommate Jessica. "Your dad called the dorm phone looking for you. Says it's urgent." My stomach dropped. My father never called the dorm phone unless something was seriously wrong, or unless he couldn't reach me on my cell, which I'd been unconsciously ignoring more frequently as I dove deeper into cybersecurity research. I glanced at my phone to find 6 missed calls and 3 increasingly concerned voicemails. I stepped into the hallway to call him back, my hands trembling slightly as I dialed. The conversation that followed would shatter the careful balance I'd been maintaining between my family's expectations and my growing passion for cybersecurity. "Sarah, thank God," my father's voice came through, strained with worry. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. I was starting to think something had happened." "I'm sorry, Dad. I was in the lab working on a project and lost track of time. Is everything okay?" A pause. "That's actually what I'm calling about. I received a very strange phone call today from your academic advisor, Mr. Patterson. He mentioned concerns about your course selection for next semester." My blood turned to ice. I'd been dreading this conversation for months, hoping I could find a way to transition gradually, to somehow make my parents understand the direction I was heading without shocking them with a complete departure from our shared plans. "What kind of concerns?" I asked, though I already knew exactly what Mr. Patterson had told him. "He said you've been spending significant time on computer science projects, that you've requested to add additional technical courses to your schedule." "Sarah, this doesn't make sense. You're a business major. Your focus should be on the courses that will prepare you for a career in accounting and business management." I closed my eyes, leaning against the cool, concrete wall of the hallway. Through the lab windows behind me, I could see my cybersecurity research displayed on multiple monitors, lines of code that represented months of work I was genuinely proud of, algorithms that Professor Martinez said showed real promise for practical application. Dad, I can explain. I've been exploring some additional areas of study that I think could be valuable for business applications. Cybersecurity is becoming increasingly important for companies of all sizes, and understanding technology could help modernize Chen Associates. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. When my father finally spoke, his voice carried a disappointment so profound it felt like a physical blow. Sarah, this is exactly what I was afraid of. College can expose you to many interesting subjects, but that doesn't mean you should lose sight of your primary objectives. You have a clear path ahead of you, one that leads to security, success, and the continuation of everything I've built. Computer science is a distraction. It's not a distraction, Dad. It's something I'm genuinely good at, something that could have real applications. Applications for what? He interrupted, his voice rising slightly. Are you planning to become one of those programmers who spends their entire career staring at screens, hoping some technology company doesn't eliminate their position next quarter? Is that the future you want instead of being a partner in an established, profitable business? The dismissal in his tone cut deeper than outright anger would have. This wasn't a disagreement about career paths. This was a fundamental inability to see value in something that had become central to my identity over the past several months. I think you should come home this weekend, he continued. We need to discuss this properly, face to face. Your mother and I have some concerns that need to be addressed before you make any decisions that could derail your education. I agreed to the visit, though every instinct told me it would end badly. The drive from Columbus to Springfield had never felt longer, each mile bringing me closer to a confrontation I wasn't prepared for but couldn't avoid. I arrived home Friday evening to find my parents waiting in the living room, with the kind of formal setup usually reserved for discussing major family decisions or delivering serious news. My mother sat in her favorite armchair, her expression carefully neutral but concerned. My father occupied his usual spot on the couch, a folder of papers spread across the coffee table in front of him. Sit down, Sarah, my mother said gently, gesturing toward the chair across from them. We need to talk. The folder, I discovered, contained printouts of my unofficial transcript, my course schedule, and what appeared to be research Professor Martinez had published that listed me as a contributing researcher. My father had done his homework thoroughly, investigating not just my academic choices but the specific projects I'd been working on. Help me understand something, my father began, his voice level but strained. According to this documentation, you've spent the last several months working on cybersecurity research instead of focusing on your business coursework. You've been listed as a researcher on academic papers that have nothing to do with accounting or business management. I took a deep breath, searching for words that might bridge the gap between their expectations and my reality. The research has been incredibly valuable. I've learned things about digital security that could revolutionize how small businesses protect themselves from cyber attacks. Dad, think about how many of your clients have been transitioning to digital record keeping. Understanding cybersecurity could help Chen and Associates offer consulting services that— Stop, my mother interjected, her voice sharper than I'd heard it in years. Just stop with the justifications, Sarah. This isn't about expanding business services. This is about you abandoning a clear, successful path for something completely unknown. My father leaned forward, his expression a mixture of disappointment and frustration. Do you have any idea how many young people waste their college education chasing after technology fantasies? How many brilliant students think they're going to become the next tech millionaire instead of building something real and lasting? This isn't about becoming a millionaire, I protested. This is about finding work that feels meaningful, that uses my actual skills and interests. Your skills and interests? My father repeated, his voice incredulous. Sarah, you've been interested in numbers and problem solving since you were 8 years old. Those skills translate perfectly to accounting and business management. What you're describing isn't discovering your authentic self. It's being seduced by the novelty of something different. The conversation continued for hours, circling through the same arguments with increasing intensity. They questioned Professor Martinez's motives, suggesting she was exploiting my naivete to get free research assistance. They dismissed cybersecurity as a field without long-term stability, pointing to news stories about technology layoffs and market volatility. They painted my growing passion for digital security as a phase, comparable to childhood interests I'd eventually outgrown. Most painfully, they questioned my judgment, my maturity, my ability to make rational decisions about my own future. Every attempt I made to explain what the research meant to me, how it felt to solve complex technical problems, how meaningful it was to work on projects that could protect people from digital threats, was met with increasingly patronizing responses. "You're 19 years old, Sarah," my mother said as midnight approached and exhaustion settled over all of us. "You think you've discovered something profound, but you're not seeing the bigger picture. Cybersecurity might seem exciting now, but 5 years from now, when you're struggling to find stable employment while David is building his career in an established field, you'll understand why we're concerned." "And what about Chen Associates?" my father added, his voice heavy with hurt I'd never heard before. "What about everything I've built, everything I hope to share with you? Are you willing to throw that away for computer programming?" I stared at them across the coffee table. These two people who had loved and supported me throughout my entire life, who had sacrificed to provide opportunities I might not have had otherwise, who genuinely believed they were protecting me from making a devastating mistake. In their eyes, I could see not just disappointment, but genuine fear that their daughter was about to ruin her life. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying to find my own path, something that feels right for who I am, not just who you want me to be." The silence that followed felt like a chasm opening between us, deeper than any disagreement we'd ever had. My father gathered the papers from the coffee table with deliberate care, his movements suggesting a finality that made my chest tighten with anxiety. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his tone shifting to the authoritative voice he used with difficult clients. "You're going to return to school Monday morning and withdraw from any computer science courses or research projects. You're going to meet with your academic advisor and recommit to your business major with a focus on accounting. And you're going to spend the summer working at Chen Associates, getting practical experience in the field you're supposed to be preparing for." "And if I don't?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. My mother and father exchanged a look that communicated years of shared parenting philosophy and mutual support for difficult decisions. "If you don't," my mother said quietly, "then you'll be making it clear that you don't value the opportunities we've provided or the guidance we're offering. And we won't continue to financially support choices we fundamentally disagree with." The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had already burned too long. They weren't just asking me to change my major. They were asking me to abandon something that had become essential to my sense of identity and purpose. The cybersecurity research wasn't just coursework to me. It was the first time I'd found academic work that felt genuinely meaningful, that connected with my natural analytical abilities in ways business courses never had. I spent the weekend in my childhood bedroom, staring at posters and trophies that represented a younger version of myself, someone who had been content to follow the path others laid out for her. The Sarah who had hung those academic achievement awards on her walls had never questioned whether her goals aligned with her parents' vision for her future. But the Sarah who returned from that weekend had tasted something different, had experienced the satisfaction of working on problems that mattered beyond profit margins and client satisfaction. The research I'd been conducting wasn't just intellectually stimulating, it was contributing to solutions for real security. Challenges that affected everything from small businesses to national infrastructure. Monday morning arrived with the weight of an impossible choice. I could return to Columbus, withdraw from my cybersecurity research, and resume the business trajectory my parents had envisioned, preserving family harmony and financial security. Or I could continue pursuing something that felt authentic and meaningful, risking everything my family had invested in my education and our relationship. I made my decision during the drive back to campus, though I didn't announce it immediately. Instead, I spent the week attending both my business courses and my cybersecurity research sessions, trying to imagine a future where I could somehow satisfy both my parents' expectations and my own growing conviction about where my talents were best applied. The breaking point came Thursday afternoon, when Professor Martinez pulled me aside after a particularly successful breakthrough in our intrusion detection research. "Sarah, I've been meaning to discuss something with you," she said, her expression excited but careful. "The Department of Homeland Security has expressed interest in our research findings. They're looking for graduate students to join a summer internship program focused on national cybersecurity initiatives. Based on your contributions to this project, I'd like to recommend you for the program." My hands trembled as she handed me the application materials. This wasn't just academic validation. This was an opportunity to contribute to cybersecurity challenges at the highest levels of government, to work on problems that could affect national security and public safety. "The application deadline is next Friday," Professor Martinez continued. "The program would provide a substantial stipend, housing in Washington, D.C., and direct mentorship from federal cybersecurity specialists. More importantly, it would give you experience with real-world applications of the research we've been conducting." That evening, I called my parents to tell them about the internship opportunity, hoping they might see it as validation of the path I'd been exploring. Instead, the conversation became the final confrontation that would reshape our family dynamics permanently. "Absolutely not," my father said before I'd even finished explaining the program details. "Sarah, we discussed this over the weekend. You agreed to refocus on your business education." "I didn't agree to anything," I replied, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "I said I would consider your concerns, and I have. But this internship represents an incredible opportunity to gain experience in a field where I have genuine talent." "Talent?" My mother's voice came through the speakerphone, sharp with frustration. "Sarah, you've been playing with computers for a few months. That doesn't constitute talent in any meaningful sense." The dismissal stung more than I'd expected. "I've been contributing to research that Professor Martinez says shows real promise for practical application. The Department of Homeland Security doesn't invite just anyone to participate in their programs." "The Department of Homeland Security," my father repeated, his tone suggesting he found the entire concept ridiculous. "Sarah, you're not qualified for federal government work. You're a 19-year-old college sophomore who's gotten caught up in some professor's research project. Why can't you see that this might be something I'm actually good at?" I asked, hearing the desperation creeping into my voice. Why is it so impossible to imagine that I might have talents that don't involve accounting and business management? The silence stretched between us, filled with years of assumptions about my future that I was now directly challenging. When my father finally responded, his voice carried a finality that made my stomach drop. "Because this isn't about talent, Sarah. This is about making responsible choices that lead to stable, successful careers. Computer science is a young person's game with no long-term security. Business and accounting provide foundations that last throughout your lifetime. So does cybersecurity," I countered. "Digital threats aren't going away. If anything, they're becoming more sophisticated and more dangerous." "Enough," my mother interrupted. "Sarah, here's what's going to happen. You're going to decline this internship application, you're going to recommit to your business major, and you're going to come home for the summer to work at Chen Associates, where you'll gain practical experience in a real career." "And if I don't?" The pause that followed felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. "If you don't," my father said quietly, "then you'll be making it clear that you're not interested in our support or guidance, and we won't continue funding an education that leads nowhere we can support." The ultimatum was starker than I'd expected, but also clearer. They weren't just disapproving of my choices. They were willing to cut off financial support entirely if I continued pursuing cybersecurity research instead of business courses. That night, I sat in my dorm room with the internship application spread across my desk, alongside course registration forms for next semester's business classes. On one side lay financial security, family approval, and a predetermined path toward joining Chen Associates. On the other side lay an unknown future, potential financial hardship, and the opportunity to pursue work that felt genuinely meaningful. I thought about the hours I'd spent in Professor Martinez's lab, the satisfaction of solving complex technical problems, the excitement of contributing to research that could protect people from digital threats. I thought about my parents' love and concern, their genuine belief that they were protecting me from making a terrible mistake. But I also thought about who I was becoming when I worked on cybersecurity challenges. How engaged and alive I felt when developing algorithms and analyzing network traffic patterns. The work didn't feel like a phase or a distraction. It felt like discovering a language I'd been meant to speak my entire life. Friday morning, I submitted my application for the Department of Homeland Security internship program. That afternoon, I called my parents to tell them about my decision. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. My father's voice remained calm and professional, as if he were discussing terms with a difficult client rather than making a life-altering decision about his daughter's future. "I'm disappointed, Sarah, but not surprised. You've made your choice clear over the past several weeks. Your mother and I won't continue supporting decisions we fundamentally disagree with." "Dad, please. Can't we find some middle ground? Some way to—" The middle ground was the conversation we had last weekend. "You've decided our guidance isn't valuable to you. I hope your computer science professors can provide the support you'll need going forward." The call ended with a finality that felt like a door slamming shut. Within hours, I received an email from the university's financial aid office informing me that my family's contribution to my education costs had been withdrawn, effective immediately. I spent that weekend moving my belongings from the comfortable dorm room my parents had paid for to a cramped off-campus apartment I could afford, with the small savings account I'd built from summer jobs and birthday money. The physical act of relocating felt symbolic of the broader transition I was making, from a supported family member to someone entirely responsible for her own choices and their consequences. David called Sunday evening, his voice carefully neutral as he tried to mediate between his loyalty to our parents and his concern for his sister. "Sarah, I think you're making a mistake," he said without preamble. "Mom and Dad aren't trying to control your life. They're trying to protect you from decisions that could limit your options." "Protect me from what, exactly? From finding work that I'm actually good at? From contributing to something meaningful? From financial instability, from career paths with no clear advancement opportunities, from industries that might not even exist in 10 years, he replied, echoing arguments I'd heard from our parents. "Look, I understand that cybersecurity seems exciting right now, but excitement isn't the same as practicality. And what if it's more than excitement? What if it's actually what I'm meant to be doing?" David sighed heavily. "Sarah, you're 19. None of us know what we're meant to be doing at 19. What we know is what provides security and opportunities for growth." The conversation with my brother hurt in a different way than the confrontations with my parents. David wasn't angry or disappointed. He was genuinely concerned, but completely unable to understand why I would risk everything for something as uncertain as a government internship in a field our family didn't respect. After he hung up, I sat alone in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes of belongings and uncertain about everything except my determination to continue pursuing cybersecurity research. The path ahead felt terrifying but authentic, in ways the business track never had. Professor Martinez found me in the lab Monday morning, working with unusual intensity on a particularly complex algorithm that had been frustrating me for weeks. "Sarah, you seem distracted. Is everything all right with your family situation?" I looked up from my computer screen, realizing I hadn't told her about the confrontation with my parents or the financial consequences of my decision to apply for the internship program. "It's complicated," I said finally, "but I'm committed to this research, regardless of other circumstances." She studied my face with the perception of someone who had mentored many students through difficult transitions. "Financial aid issues?" I nodded, not trusting myself to explain the details without breaking down entirely. "There are resources available," she said quietly. "Emergency funding for students facing unexpected circumstances, work-study programs that could help cover living expenses. And if you're accepted into the DHS internship program, the stipend would address immediate financial concerns." The kindness in her voice nearly undid my carefully maintained composure. For the first time since submitting the internship application, I allowed myself to hope that the choice I'd made might actually lead somewhere positive, rather than simply representing a rebellion against my family's expectations. "Thank you," I managed to say, "for everything, for seeing potential in me that I didn't even recognize myself." "That's what mentors are for," she replied with a smile. To help students discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed. Your analytical skills and intuitive understanding of digital security challenges are exceptional, Sarah. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. As I returned to my algorithm work that morning, I carried with me both the weight of my family's disappointment and the validation of someone who understood the value of the path I was choosing. The code flowing across my screen represented more than technical problem solving. It represented a future I was building entirely on my own terms, regardless of the cost. The acceptance letter from the Department of Homeland Security arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered to my cramped off-campus apartment by certified mail that required my signature. I stared at the official government seal for several minutes before opening the envelope, my hands trembling with a mixture of anticipation and disbelief. Inside, formal letterhead announced that I had been selected for the Summer Cybersecurity Research Initiative, effective June 1st through August 31st, with housing provided in Washington, D.C., and a stipend that would cover not just my living expenses, but also help with the following semester's tuition. I read the letter 3 times before the reality sank in. This wasn't just validation of my decision to pursue cybersecurity despite my family's objections. This was an opportunity to work alongside federal specialists on challenges that could affect national security. The program description outlined projects ranging from developing countermeasures for state-sponsored cyber attacks to creating detection systems for critical infrastructure protection. My first instinct was to call my parents, to share this achievement with the people who had celebrated every academic milestone throughout my childhood. I reached for my phone, started to dial their number, then stopped. The silence between us had stretched for nearly 2 months now, broken only by terse communications about practical matters like health insurance and tax information. I wasn't sure they would see this internship as an achievement rather than further evidence of my poor judgment. Instead, I called Professor Martinez, whose excitement was immediate and infectious. Sarah, this is extraordinary. The DHS summer program only accepts 20 students nationwide, and they typically choose candidates who are already in graduate programs. Your selection as a sophomore is virtually unprecedented. Her words carried weight I hadn't fully grasped when reading the acceptance letter. This wasn't just a good opportunity. This was recognition at the highest levels of government that my work showed exceptional promise. The validation felt both thrilling and terrifying, representing a level of responsibility I wasn't sure I was prepared for. The weeks leading up to the internship passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. I worked extra shifts at the campus library to save money for the move to Washington, studied advanced cybersecurity texts that Professor Martinez recommended, and tried to imagine what it would be like to work in an environment where my research could have immediate, practical applications for national security. The financial stress of paying for everything myself had been more challenging than I'd anticipated. Ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches became dietary staples, and I learned to navigate university resources I'd never needed when my parents were covering my expenses. The emergency financial aid Professor Martinez had mentioned helped cover tuition, but living expenses required careful budgeting and constant vigilance about unnecessary spending. Despite the challenges, something unexpected was happening. The independence I'd been forced into was revealing strengths I hadn't known I possessed. Managing my own finances, making decisions about my education without family input, taking responsibility for the consequences of my choices. All of this was building confidence in ways I couldn't have anticipated. My relationship with David remained strained but not completely severed. He called occasionally, usually late at night when he was stressed about his own coursework, or when family gatherings made my absence particularly noticeable. Our conversations were careful, both of us avoiding topics that might trigger arguments about my career choices or our parents' reaction to them. "Mom asks about you," he said during one of these calls, his voice carrying the weight of family dynamics he was trying unsuccessfully to navigate. "She doesn't say much, but I can tell she's worried." "Worried about what?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "About whether you're eating enough, whether you're safe living alone, whether you have any idea what you're doing with your life." He paused. "She still thinks this is a phase, that you'll realize the cybersecurity thing isn't practical and come home." The assumption that my passion for digital security work was temporary hurt more than outright disapproval would have. It suggested they saw my entire identity shift as something shallow, a rebellious phase rather than genuine growth and self-discovery. "And what do you think?" I asked. David was quiet for a long moment. "I think you seem different when you talk about your research. More focused, more confident. I don't understand what you're doing, but you sound like you know what you're talking about in ways you never did when discussing business courses." His acknowledgement, grudging, though it was, meant more to me than he probably realized. Even if he didn't fully support my choices, he was at least recognizing that they represented something authentic rather than mere rebellion. The move to Washington, D.C. in late May felt like stepping into an entirely different world. The DHS facility, where I would be working, was a modern complex in Arlington, Virginia, filled with technology I'd only read about in academic papers. My assigned housing was a studio apartment in a government-subsidized complex near the metro, small but clean and surrounded by other young professionals working in various federal departments. My first day at the Department of Homeland Security was both overwhelming and exhilarating. I was assigned to a team led by Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a cybersecurity specialist who had transitioned from academic research to federal service 5 years earlier. The team included 2 graduate students from MIT, a recent PhD from Carnegie Mellon, and myself, the youngest and least credentialed member by significant margins. "Don't let the age difference intimidate you," Dr. Rodriguez said during our initial team meeting. "You're here because your undergraduate research showed unusual sophistication and practical promise. We need fresh perspectives on problems that experienced analysts might approach with too many preconceptions." The project we were assigned involved developing detection algorithms for advanced persistent threats, sophisticated cyber attacks designed to remain hidden within target networks for extended periods while gathering intelligence or preparing for larger strikes. These attacks represented some of the most challenging cybersecurity problems facing both government and private sector organizations. My academic research with Professor Martinez had touched on similar challenges. But working with classified intelligence about actual attacks provided context I'd never had access to. The threats we were analyzing weren't theoretical scenarios from textbooks. They were real attempts by foreign actors to infiltrate American infrastructure, steal intellectual property, and position themselves for potential cyber warfare. The technical challenges were more complex than anything I'd encountered in academic settings, but somehow I found myself thriving under the pressure. The pattern recognition skills I'd developed through months of analyzing network traffic data proved directly applicable to identifying subtle indicators of sophisticated intrusions. Dr. Rodriguez became an unexpected mentor, someone who understood both the technical and strategic implications of cybersecurity work in ways that bridged the gap between academic theory and real-world application. She had a gift for explaining complex geopolitical contexts that helped me understand why certain technical problems mattered beyond their immediate scope. "Cybersecurity isn't just about protecting computer systems," she explained during one of our weekly one-on-one meetings. "It's about protecting the digital foundations that modern society depends on. Power grids, financial networks, communication systems, transportation infrastructure. Everything that keeps our economy and government functioning relies on digital systems that are constantly under attack." This broader perspective transformed how I approached the technical challenges we were tackling. Each algorithm I developed, each detection method I refined, had potential implications for protecting critical systems that millions of people depended on without ever thinking about their vulnerability. My teammates initially treated me with polite skepticism, clearly wondering how someone with less than a year of serious cybersecurity research could contribute meaningfully to problems they'd been working on for years. But as weeks passed and my contributions proved valuable, their attitudes shifted from skepticism to genuine collaboration. The breakthrough came in mid-July when I developed a new approach to identifying command and control communications used by advanced persistent threats. Traditional detection methods focused on specific technical signatures, but I had been working on behavioral analysis that could identify suspicious patterns even when attackers modified their technical approaches. "This is remarkable," said James, one of the graduate students from MIT, as we reviewed the results of testing my algorithm against historical attack data. Your approach is catching intrusions that our signature-based systems completely missed. Dr. Rodriguez was even more enthusiastic. Sarah, this methodology could revolutionize how we approach threat detection. Instead of playing catch-up with attackers who constantly modify their tools, we're identifying behavioral patterns that are much harder for them to disguise. The validation was intoxicating, but it also came with pressure I hadn't anticipated. Other teams within DHS began requesting briefings on my research methodology. Senior analysts who had been working in cybersecurity for decades wanted to understand how a sophomore undergraduate had developed detection approaches they hadn't considered. The attention was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. I was 20 years old, working alongside people with advanced degrees and years of experience, contributing to solutions for problems that could affect national security. The imposter syndrome was overwhelming at times, but the results spoke for themselves. My algorithms were working in ways that traditional approaches had failed. In early August, Dr. Rodriguez called me into her office for what I assumed would be a routine progress meeting. Instead, she had news that would change the trajectory of my career in ways I couldn't have imagined. Sarah, I've been asked to brief the FBI's cybersecurity division about your threat detection methodology. They're particularly interested in applications for protecting financial infrastructure from state-sponsored attacks. She paused, watching my reaction carefully. They've requested that you present your research directly to their senior leadership team. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. The FBI's cybersecurity division represented the highest levels of federal law enforcement's approach to digital threats. The idea that they wanted to hear from me, a college student who had been working in government cybersecurity for barely 2 months, seemed impossible. Are you sure they know who I am? I asked. I mean, my background, my experience level? Dr. Rodriguez smiled. They know exactly who you are. Word travels quickly in the cybersecurity community when someone develops genuinely innovative approaches to long-standing problems. Your behavioral detection methodology isn't just academically interesting. It has immediate practical applications that could protect critical infrastructure. The presentation was scheduled for the following Friday at FBI headquarters in Washington. I spent the entire week preparing, refining my research findings into a format suitable for senior federal officials, practicing explanations of complex technical concepts that would be accessible to people with varying levels of cybersecurity background. The night before the presentation, I called Professor Martinez to update her on the development and seek advice about presenting to such a high-level audience. Sarah, you need to understand what this represents, she said, her voice filled with pride and excitement. Federal agencies don't invite undergraduate students to brief senior leadership unless their work has exceptional merit. This isn't just recognition of your technical skills. It's acknowledgement that you've contributed something genuinely valuable to national cybersecurity capabilities. Her words helped calm my nerves, but also intensified my awareness of the responsibility I was carrying. This wasn't just about my personal academic achievement. My research had potential implications for protecting systems that millions of people depended on. The FBI presentation went better than I had dared to hope. The senior officials asked challenging questions that pushed me to think about applications and limitations of my methodology in ways I hadn't fully considered, but their engagement was clearly interested rather than skeptical. They understood the significance of behavioral detection approaches that could identify threats regardless of specific technical implementations. Director Sarah Chen, who led the FBI's cybersecurity division, approached me after the formal presentation concluded. She was a woman in her early 50s, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it, someone who had clearly navigated complex professional challenges while maintaining both competence and authenticity. Ms. Chen, she said, and I realized we shared a surname that would make this conversation particularly memorable. Your research represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking our cybersecurity efforts need. Have you given any thought to your plans after graduation? The question was clearly more than casual interest. I'm still an undergraduate, ma'am. I have 2 more years before I need to make those decisions. That gives us time to watch your continued development, she replied with a slight smile. The Bureau is always interested in recruiting individuals who demonstrate exceptional analytical capabilities combined with practical problem-solving skills. Your work suggests you possess both. As I rode the metro back to my apartment that evening, I found myself processing not just the professional validation but the personal transformation that had brought me to this point. 6 months earlier, I had been a business major trying to please my parents by following a predetermined path toward joining the family accounting firm. Now I was receiving recruitment interest from the FBI based on cybersecurity research that had practical applications for national security. The change felt surreal, but also authentic in ways my previous academic trajectory never had. Working on cybersecurity challenges didn't feel like fulfilling someone else's expectations. It felt like discovering capabilities I hadn't known I possessed, contributing to solutions for problems that genuinely mattered. The internship concluded in late August, with evaluations that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Dr. Rodriguez's final assessment noted that my research contributions had been exceptional for any level, remarkable for an undergraduate, and recommended that I be considered for advanced research opportunities in subsequent summers. More significantly, the behavioral detection methodology I had developed was being incorporated into DHS threat monitoring systems, with potential applications across multiple federal agencies. Technical work I had started as an academic exercise was becoming part of the infrastructure protecting American digital systems from sophisticated attacks. The return to Ohio State for my junior year felt like reverse culture shock. After spending the summer working on problems with immediate national security implications, returning to undergraduate coursework required significant mental adjustment. The cybersecurity classes that had once seemed challenging now felt elementary compared to the real-world applications I had been developing. Professor Martinez welcomed me back with enthusiasm that matched my own excitement about continuing research that had proven its practical value. But she also had news that would force me to confront the personal costs of the professional success I had been achieving. "Sarah, I received a call from your father last week," she said during our first meeting of the new semester. "He wanted to understand what you had been doing over the summer, what opportunities you might be considering for the future." My stomach tightened. I hadn't spoken to my parents since leaving for Washington, communicating only through brief emails about practical matters when absolutely necessary. The idea that my father had been investigating my internship activities felt both invasive and oddly hopeful. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I explained the significance of your research contributions, the recognition you've received from federal agencies, the career opportunities that are likely to be available to someone with your demonstrated capabilities." She paused. "He seemed surprised by the level of validation your work has received from the cybersecurity community." The conversation with Professor Martinez left me with conflicted emotions. Part of me was gratified that my father was finally taking my cybersecurity work seriously enough to investigate its legitimacy. But another part was frustrated that external validation from federal agencies had been necessary to convince him that my choices might have merit. That evening, I made a decision that had been building throughout the summer. I called home for the first time in months, prepared to share my internship experiences regardless of how my parents might respond. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice immediately shifting from polite telephone greeting to surprised recognition. "Sarah, oh my goodness, how are you? Where are you? Are you all right?" The concern in her voice was immediate and genuine, reminding me that beneath all the disagreements about my career choices, she remained my mother, someone who worried about my well-being regardless of our professional conflicts. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm back at school for junior year. I wanted to call and update you about the summer internship, about what I've been working on." A pause. Then my father's voice as he picked up the extension. "Sarah, we've been wondering how you were doing. Professor Martinez mentioned you had some kind of federal government position." For the next hour, I described my summer experiences in detail. The technical challenges I had worked on, the recognition my research had received, the potential career opportunities that were emerging from my cybersecurity work. I explained how behavioral threat detection could revolutionize cybersecurity defense, how my algorithms were being incorporated into federal monitoring systems, how FBI leadership had expressed interest in my continued development. My parents listened without interruption, occasionally asking questions that suggested they were genuinely trying to understand the significance of what I had accomplished. When I finished, the silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had been disconnected. Finally, my father spoke, his voice carrying emotions I couldn't quite identify. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. When you told us about cybersecurity research, I assumed it was impractical academic work without real applications. I didn't understand that you were developing solutions for actual national security challenges. I tried to explain that it was meaningful work, I replied, but I understand why it was hard to see the practical applications from the outside. No, he said firmly, that's not fair to you. I should have trusted your judgment, should have tried harder to understand what you were discovering about yourself. Instead, I made assumptions based on my own limited knowledge. My mother's voice joined the conversation, tentative but sincere. We've missed you, Sarah. The house has felt wrong without you here, without knowing how you're doing, whether you're happy with the choices you've made. The admission opened something in my chest that I had been keeping carefully closed throughout the months of separation. Despite everything, despite the professional validation and the exciting opportunities, I had missed them too. Not the conflict and the pressure to conform to their expectations, but the fundamental relationship, the sense of family connection that had been part of my identity since childhood. I've missed you too, I admitted, but I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed following my own instincts, that the work I'm passionate about has genuine value. You've certainly proved that, my father said, and I could hear something like pride beginning to emerge in his voice. Federal agencies don't recruit college students unless their capabilities are exceptional. The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical matters like finances and housing, but also beginning to address the emotional distance that had developed between us. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Too much had happened for that to be possible in a single phone call. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement from all of us, that family relationships could evolve to accommodate different visions of success and fulfillment. As I hung up the phone that night, I realized that the validation I had been seeking wasn't just professional recognition from federal agencies or academic acknowledgement from professors. It was the harder, more complex validation of being seen and accepted by the people who had known me longest, who had loved me before I achieved anything remarkable, who could witness my growth and change without requiring me to abandon my authentic self. The summer had transformed me from a college student exploring interesting research into someone whose work had practical applications for national security challenges. But this phone call had transformed something equally important. My understanding that professional success and family relationships didn't have to be mutually exclusive. That the people who love us can learn to see us differently when we prove that our authentic choices lead to meaningful contributions. Junior year was beginning with possibilities I couldn't have imagined a year earlier, but for the first time since changing my major, those possibilities included the hope of sharing my achievements with the family that had shaped me, even as I continued developing into someone they were still learning to understand. The invitation arrived in October, printed on official FBI letterhead, and addressed to my campus apartment. Inside, Director Sarah Chen had personally requested my participation in a joint task force investigating a series of sophisticated cyber attacks targeting regional banking systems across the Midwest. The letter explained that my behavioral detection methodology had proven particularly effective at identifying the attack patterns, and federal investigators needed my direct assistance to prevent what appeared to be an escalating campaign against financial infrastructure. I read the letter twice before the implications fully registered. This wasn't another internship or academic collaboration. This was a direct request for my expertise from the highest levels of federal law enforcement. The timeline was immediate, requiring my presence in Washington within the week for what could be an extended investigation period. Professor Martinez found me in the lab that afternoon, staring at the FBI letter with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Sarah, this is extraordinary. Federal agencies don't request civilian consultants unless they're facing problems their internal teams can't solve independently. But I'm still an undergraduate, I protested. How can I contribute to an active federal investigation when I haven't even finished my degree? She smiled knowingly. Because sometimes fresh perspectives see patterns that experienced analysts miss. Your research has already proven its value in controlled environments. Now they need to test it against live threats with immediate consequences. The conversation with Professor Martinez helped clarify the significance of what I was being offered. But it also raised practical concerns about managing my academic responsibilities while participating in federal law enforcement activities. We worked out an arrangement where my investigation work would count as independent study credit, allowing me to maintain my enrollment while contributing to national cybersecurity efforts. That evening, I called my parents to inform them about the FBI request. The conversation was markedly different from our interactions a year earlier, when they had dismissed my cybersecurity interests as impractical academic diversions. "The FBI is requesting your personal assistance?" my father asked, his voice carrying amazement that hadn't fully settled into pride yet. "Sarah, that's incredible. How many 20-year-olds get called in to help with federal investigations?" My mother's response was more concerned with practical matters. "Will this be safe? Are you qualified to handle whatever they're asking you to do?" "I think so," I replied honestly. "The investigation involves the same type of threat detection work I've been developing, just applied to active attacks rather than historical data." "We're proud of you," my father said, his voice warm with an emotion that had been absent from our previous conversations about my career choices. "When we spoke to Professor Martinez, she explained how significant your research contributions have been, but this takes it to an entirely different level." The acknowledgement felt like a gift I had been waiting for without fully realizing it. Not just professional validation, but recognition from my family that the path I had chosen led to meaningful contributions that extended far beyond personal satisfaction. I arrived in Washington the following Monday to find the FBI task force operating out of a secure facility in downtown D.C., equipped with technology and resources that made my university lab look primitive by comparison. The team included federal investigators, financial industry security specialists, and technical analysts from multiple agencies, all focused on understanding and stopping what appeared to be a coordinated campaign against regional banking systems. Director Chen introduced me to the team with an efficiency that suggested my reputation had preceded me. "Sarah's behavioral detection methodology has identified patterns in these attacks that our traditional approaches missed entirely. She'll be working directly with our technical analysis team to develop countermeasures." The investigation revealed the sophisticated nature of modern cyber warfare in ways my academic research hadn't fully captured. The attacks we were analyzing weren't random criminal activities, but components of a larger campaign designed to test American financial system vulnerabilities while gathering intelligence for potential future strikes. My role involved analyzing network traffic from compromised banking systems, identifying behavioral signatures that could distinguish legitimate transactions from malicious activities designed to map system architectures and security protocols. The technical challenges were more complex than anything I had encountered, but the behavioral patterns I had learned to recognize proved directly applicable to identifying subtle indicators of coordinated reconnaissance. Working alongside seasoned federal investigators provided insights into the broader context of cybersecurity threats that academic research couldn't replicate. These weren't theoretical problems with abstract solutions. They were immediate challenges with consequences for millions of people who depended on financial systems functioning reliably and securely. Agent Maria Santos, a veteran cybercrime investigator, became an unexpected mentor during the weeks-long investigation. She had transitioned to cybersecurity from traditional financial crimes and understood both the technical and investigative aspects of digital threats in ways that bridged different professional perspectives. "The key to effective cybersecurity isn't just understanding technology," she explained during one of our late-night analysis sessions. "It's understanding human behavior, both the attackers who develop these campaigns and the defenders who need to respond effectively. Your research succeeds because it focuses on behavioral patterns rather than just technical signatures." Her perspective helped me understand why my detection methodology had proven valuable beyond its immediate technical applications. Cybersecurity ultimately involved human decision-making, and algorithms that could recognize patterns in human behavior had advantages over systems that only analyze technical data. The breakthrough in our investigation came during my third week on the task force, when my behavioral analysis identified a previously unrecognized connection between attacks on different banking systems. The technical signatures were completely different, suggesting separate campaigns, but the behavioral patterns revealed coordination that traditional analysis had missed. "This changes everything," said Dr. Michael Torres, the FBI's senior cybersecurity analyst, as we reviewed my findings. "We've been treating these as isolated incidents, but your analysis shows they're components of a unified intelligence-gathering operation." The discovery redirected the entire investigation, shifting focus from reactive incident response to proactive threat hunting, based on the behavioral signatures I had identified. Within days, the expanded analysis revealed a network of compromised systems across multiple states, all connected to the same foreign intelligence operation. Director Chen called me into her office after the investigation team had briefed senior FBI leadership about our findings. The conversation that followed would reshape my understanding of both my professional capabilities and my future opportunities. "Sarah, your contributions to this investigation have been exceptional," she began, her tone professional but warm. "The behavioral detection approach you developed has provided insights that our experienced teams missed entirely. More importantly, your analysis has prevented what could have been a devastating attack on regional financial infrastructure." She paused, studying my reaction before continuing. "I want to discuss your plans after graduation. The Bureau has a critical need for analysts who can think creatively about emerging threats while maintaining the technical expertise to develop practical solutions." The conversation was both an evaluation of my performance and an informal recruitment discussion. Director Chen explained opportunities for federal cybersecurity careers that I hadn't known existed, pathways that would allow me to continue developing innovative approaches to digital threats while contributing directly to national security efforts. "What would that involve exactly?" I asked, trying to process the implications of what she was describing. "Graduate school funded by the Bureau, advanced training in federal investigative methods, mentorship from senior analysts, and ultimately a position developing cybersecurity capabilities for law enforcement and national security applications." She leaned back in her chair. "Essentially, the opportunity to continue the work you've already started, but with resources and support that academic institutions can't provide." The offer was more comprehensive than I had imagined possible, but it also represented a commitment to federal service that would define my career for years to come. I asked for time to consider the implications and discuss the opportunity with mentors and family members whose opinions mattered to me. That evening, I called Professor Martinez to update her about the investigation results and the career opportunity Director Chen had described. Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Sarah, this represents validation at the highest levels of the cybersecurity community. Federal agencies don't offer funded graduate programs unless they're convinced someone has exceptional potential for long-term contributions. But it means committing to federal service for several years after graduation," I pointed out. "I'd be giving up flexibility to explore other opportunities. You'd be gaining access to resources and challenges that private sector or academic positions couldn't offer." She countered. "The work you'd be doing could have implications for protecting critical infrastructure from sophisticated threats. How many people get opportunities to contribute to problems at that level?" Her perspective helped clarify the significance of what I was being offered, but I also wanted to discuss the opportunity with my family, particularly given how dramatically my relationship with my parents had evolved over the past year. I drove home to Springfield that weekend for the first time since the confrontation that had led to my financial independence. The house felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, filled with memories of a younger version of myself who had been content to follow predetermined paths without questioning whether they aligned with her authentic interests. My parents' greeting was warm but careful, both of us navigating the delicate process of rebuilding relationships that had been strained by fundamental disagreements about my future direction. Over dinner, I explained the FBI investigation, my contributions to identifying coordinated attacks, and the career opportunity Director Chen had described. "Federal service?" My father mused, his tone thoughtful rather than dismissive. "That's certainly not what any of us envisioned when you started college, but it sounds like meaningful work with genuine security implications." My mother's concerns were more practical. Would this be safe? Are federal cybersecurity positions dangerous? "The work would be primarily analytical," I explained. "Developing detection systems and investigating digital threats, not fieldwork or law enforcement activities that involve physical risk. And the graduate school component would be funded entirely." My father asked, his accountant's instincts focusing on practical financial considerations. "Tuition, living expenses, and additional training provided by federal agencies. Essentially getting paid to continue developing the research that's already proven valuable for national security applications." The conversation continued through the evening, covering details about federal career trajectories, opportunities for advancement, and the types of challenges I would be working on as a government cybersecurity specialist. My parents asked informed questions that suggested they had been researching cybersecurity careers since learning about my FBI involvement. Most significantly, their tone throughout the discussion was supportive rather than skeptical. They seemed genuinely interested in understanding the work I would be doing and proud that their daughter had received recognition from the highest levels of federal law enforcement. "I owe you another apology," my father said as the evening concluded. "When you first changed your major, I was so focused on protecting you from what I saw as impractical career choices that I couldn't see the potential for meaningful work in cybersecurity. Your success has forced me to recognize how limited my perspective was. You were trying to protect me based on what you understood about career stability," I replied. "I don't think either of us could have predicted where cybersecurity research would lead." "No, but I should have trusted your judgment more and tried harder to understand what you were discovering about your own capabilities and interests." He paused. "What you've accomplished with the FBI investigation proves that you were right to follow your instincts, even when it meant disappointing us." The acknowledgement felt like closing a circle that had been opened when I first decided to pursue cybersecurity research despite my family's objections. Not just professional validation, but personal recognition that the authentic choices I had made led to contributions that were both personally fulfilling and socially meaningful. Sunday morning, David joined us for breakfast before I returned to Columbus. His attitude toward my career choices had evolved significantly over the past year, particularly as the practical implications of cybersecurity work became more apparent. "I still don't understand exactly what you do," he admitted with a smile, "but I can see that you're good at it and that it matters to people who understand these issues better than I do." "That's probably the best endorsement I could ask for," I replied, appreciating his honesty about the limitations of his understanding while acknowledging the evidence of my professional success. "And it sounds like you found something that uses your analytical skills in ways that business courses never did. You seem more confident, more engaged when you talk about your work." His observation reinforced my growing certainty that accepting the FBI's offer represented the right next step in a career path that had emerged organically from following my authentic interests, despite external pressure to conform to others' expectations. I returned to Columbus with a decision that felt both inevitable and carefully considered. Federal service would provide opportunities to continue developing innovative approaches to cybersecurity challenges, while contributing directly to protecting critical infrastructure from sophisticated threats. Monday morning, I called Director Chen to accept the Bureau's offer for funded graduate school and subsequent federal cybersecurity career. Her response was immediate satisfaction mixed with practical efficiency. "Excellent. We'll begin processing your security clearance immediately and arrange for you to start graduate coursework next fall at George Washington University's cybersecurity program. In the meantime, we'd like you to continue consulting on investigations where your behavioral detection expertise could be valuable." The arrangement would allow me to complete my undergraduate degree while participating in federal cybersecurity efforts, building experience and credentials that would prepare me for advanced graduate work and eventual full-time federal service. Professor Martinez was delighted when I updated her about my decision and the continuing opportunities for federal consultation work. "This represents the best possible outcome for someone with your talents and interests. You'll have access to challenges and resources that could revolutionize how we approach cybersecurity defense." As spring semester progressed, I found myself dividing time between undergraduate coursework, ongoing federal consultation projects, and preparation for graduate school applications that were already guaranteed acceptance. The balance was demanding but energizing, confirming that I had found work that engaged my capabilities while contributing to problems that genuinely mattered. Most importantly, my relationship with my family continued to strengthen as they witnessed the practical implications of choices they had initially opposed. Regular phone calls now included updates about federal projects I could discuss publicly, and conversations about career development that assumed cybersecurity was a legitimate, valuable profession rather than an impractical academic distraction. The transformation felt complete in May when my parents attended my undergraduate honors presentation about behavioral threat detection methodology. Watching them in the audience, asking informed questions about technical applications, and nodding with genuine comprehension as I explained complex cybersecurity concepts, I realized how far all of us had traveled from the confrontations that had dominated our relationship 2 years earlier. After the presentation, my father approached with an expression that combined pride with something like wonder. "Sarah, I finally understand what you've been working toward. This isn't just technical research. It's developing solutions for problems that could affect millions of people." "That's exactly what drew me to cybersecurity," I replied. "The opportunity to use analytical skills for work that protects systems people depend on without ever thinking about their vulnerability. And you've proven that following your authentic interests can lead to contributions that matter beyond personal satisfaction," my mother added. "I'm sorry it took us so long to recognize the value of what you were discovering about yourself." Their acknowledgement represented more than family reconciliation. It validated the difficult process of choosing authenticity over approval, of trusting my own judgment about my capabilities and interests, even when that meant disappointing people whose opinions mattered deeply to me. As I prepared for graduate school and federal cybersecurity career that would begin in the fall, I carried with me both professional confidence and personal understanding that the strongest foundations for meaningful work come from honest self-assessment rather than external expectations. The path hadn't been easy, but it had led to opportunities I couldn't have imagined when I first changed my major despite my family's objections. 3 years later, I stood in the FBI's main conference room, preparing to brief the National Security Council about a cybersecurity threat that my team had identified and neutralized before it could compromise critical infrastructure across 12 states. The attack had been sophisticated, targeting power grid management systems through a coordinated campaign that traditional detection methods had completely missed. My behavioral analysis algorithms, now integrated into federal monitoring systems nationwide, had identified the threat patterns weeks before the planned execution. Director Robert Thompson, who had replaced Director Chen when she was promoted to Deputy Attorney General, introduced me to the assembled officials with words that still felt surreal despite the professional recognition I had received over the preceding years. "Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sarah Chen, our senior cybersecurity analyst, whose threat detection methodology prevented what could have been the most devastating infrastructure attack in American history." The title still caught me off guard sometimes. Dr. Chen, the result of completing my graduate degree in record time while working full-time for the Bureau, developing new cybersecurity capabilities that had earned recognition throughout the federal intelligence community. The young woman who had been kicked out of her family home for pursuing computer science instead of business had become someone whose expertise protected millions of people from digital threats they would never know existed. As I presented the technical details of the thwarted attack to cabinet-level officials, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The desperate nights in my cramped apartment, surviving on ramen noodles while my parents refused to support my career choices. The uncertainty about whether cybersecurity work would lead to meaningful opportunities or professional dead ends. The gradual recognition that following my authentic interests, despite the immediate costs, had led to contributions I couldn't have imagined from within the safety of predetermined expectations. The briefing concluded with questions that demonstrated how significantly my work had impacted federal cybersecurity capabilities. Attorney General Martinez wanted to understand how behavioral detection could be applied to other types of digital threats. The Secretary of Homeland Security asked about expanding the methodology to protect private sector infrastructure. Even the President's Chief of Staff inquired about developing similar approaches for international cybersecurity cooperation. Afterward, Director Thompson walked with me toward the elevator, his expression combining professional satisfaction with personal pride in the team he had helped develop. "Sarah, 5 years ago you were an undergraduate student whose family thought cybersecurity was impractical academic nonsense. Today you briefed the National Security Council about protecting American infrastructure from foreign attacks. That's a remarkable transformation." "The work transformed me as much as I contributed to it," I replied honestly. Finding something that engaged my capabilities while addressing problems that genuinely mattered changed how I understood my own potential. "And your family's perspective has evolved as well?" I smiled, thinking about the phone call I would make that evening to update my parents about the NSC briefing. They've become my strongest supporters, though they still don't fully understand the technical details of what I do. The relationship with my family had indeed evolved into something stronger than what we'd had when I was dutifully following their predetermined path. Instead of surface-level agreement about career choices I didn't fully embrace, we now had genuine respect for each other's perspectives and authentic pride in accomplishments that reflected my actual capabilities and interests. My father had even started referring clients to cybersecurity consultants when they needed digital security advice, acknowledging expertise I had developed in areas he didn't pretend to understand. My mother regularly forwarded news articles about cybersecurity threats to me, demonstrating her continued interest in work she once dismissed as impractical. David had surprised everyone by requesting my advice when his company faced a data breach, recognizing that his little sister had become an expert in areas that were increasingly critical for business operations. The reversal from him dismissing my career choices to seeking my professional guidance felt like a final validation of the path I had chosen. That evening, I called home from my apartment in Arlington, a spacious place I could afford on a federal salary that had grown substantially as my expertise proved increasingly valuable. The conversation with my parents had become a comfortable weekly tradition, sharing updates about work I could discuss publicly and family news that kept me connected to my roots in Springfield. "The National Security Council?" my mother repeated, her voice filled with amazement that hadn't diminished despite years of professional achievements. "Sarah, that's incredible. 5 years ago, we were arguing about your computer science courses, and now you're briefing the president's senior advisors." "It feels surreal sometimes," I admitted, "but it's also the natural result of following work that genuinely engaged my capabilities, even when it meant disappointing people whose opinions mattered to me." My father's voice joined the conversation, carrying warmth that had replaced the disappointment and frustration of our earlier interactions. "We owe you an apology that we've never fully expressed. When you changed majors and pursued cybersecurity despite our objections, you were demonstrating judgment and self-awareness that we should have respected instead of opposing. You were trying to protect me based on what you understood about career stability and success," I replied. "I can't blame you for wanting to guide me toward what seemed like a safer path. But we should have trusted your instincts about your own capabilities and interests," my mother added. "Your success has taught us that authentic choices often lead to better outcomes than safe ones, even when they initially seem risky." Their acknowledgement still felt meaningful, not because I needed their validation anymore, but because it represented growth for all of us. They had learned to see beyond their initial assumptions about practical career paths, while I had learned that family relationships could evolve to accommodate different definitions of success and fulfillment. As we concluded the call, I reflected on the broader implications of the journey that had brought me from family conflict to national recognition. The most important lesson hadn't been about cybersecurity or federal service, but about the courage required to trust your own judgment when it conflicts with others, expectations, even people whose love and support you value deeply. The young woman who had been kicked out of her family home for failing to follow a business track had discovered that what others perceived as failure was actually the beginning of finding her authentic professional identity. The algorithms I had developed weren't just technical achievements. They were proof that following your genuine interests and capabilities, despite immediate costs and external pressure, often leads to contributions you couldn't have imagined from within the safety of conformity. Standing at my apartment window that night, looking out over the lights of Washington, D.C., I thought about all the young people who might be facing similar choices between safety and authenticity. Between others, expectations, and their own instincts about their capabilities and interests. My story had become proof that sometimes what looks like rebellion is actually the beginning of discovering who you're meant to become. The midnight blue algorithms flowing across my computer screen represented more than cybersecurity code. They were evidence that the most meaningful work emerges when you have the courage to trust your own judgment about your authentic capabilities, even when that means disappointing people whose approval you desperately want. Sometimes reclaiming your authentic path isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that your instincts about your own potential were worth trusting, regardless of the immediate costs or external pressure to conform. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.